East Carolina, as you'll see on my bio, as Assistant Vice Chancellor for Community and Regional Development, and work with a lot of the communities out here. So anytime I'm back east, I feel like I'm home. Where's the barbecue? Where's the chicken? We got half of that today, right? So it's exciting to be back. You know, we are really, and I see Steve here. Steve is a former member of our Rural Infrastructure Authority, so good to have you in the room. He'll be as much of a resource for you as me in terms of what we can do at NC Commerce. We are very, excited about our role in the whole economic development piece. I see economic development in kind of a dual structure. You have the traditional economic development piece with our recruitment, retention, and marketing, but there's also a readiness factor for communities to be positioned well for economic development, and I think that our role in that is vital. As a department, our role is vital as it relates to our division and what we do to make sure that we can help position communities to be prepared for economic development. Our rural communities face challenges, but there's so many opportunities. We don't want to miss out on those. So that's one of our kind of primary focuses as a division. We have a wonderful staff that really works hard to build strong partnerships in our rural communities, with our rural communities, and in support of those rural communities. We do that on a daily basis, and it's a big time thing, I think, because it's very important work. And I think that these are some very important times for rural North Carolina and rural development. When you think about the issues that we're facing, I've really been excited and energized by the high level of dialogue that we're seeing around economic development and rural development at the state level. You've heard about the governor's Hometown Strong program and the programs at Commerce and our other agencies in state government. But I really believe that that alignment and that coordination, that conversation really positions us well to move the needle on a number of key issues, especially as it relates to rural development. When you think about broadband and the impact that that's having on our communities, and extending broadband to the far reaches of North Carolina to make sure that all of our students have that same level of competitiveness, that opportunities, and that communities can compete for economic development opportunities. Everybody will tell you, David will tell you, I'll tell you, the Secretary will tell you, if you don't have the pieces in place for economic development, you'll miss out on opportunities, and broadband is one of those things that we have to have in place to make sure that we can be as competitive as possible. When you think about housing and what housing means to our communities, whether it's affordable housing or housing to support workforce or housing to support our middle class families so that teachers and nurses and police officers can live and work in the communities, can live in the communities they work and be a part of those communities to create a sense of place is very important. And issues like local government capacity, and this is one that's very important to me. I think when we look at our rural communities, especially those that have limited resources and limited capacity, that capacity issue is one that is really critical to their competitiveness and how they can compete for economic development opportunities. So we need to address those issues. And when we talk about capacity, I look at that comprehensively. A lot of things that bigger cities take for granted in our small towns, like day-to-day administration and management responsibilities, how we deliver public services, how we develop projects and implement projects in our communities. Do we have the capacity to do that, and how do we address those? And then readiness, as I mentioned earlier, for economic development opportunities and prosperity. So as we align together and build those programs together and make sure that we're on the same page, I think we position ourselves for rural prosperity and economic development investments. And that's where folks in this room come in. How do we connect, and how do we help build those bridges to align and create an environment for prosperity in rural communities and for economic development? And at Commerce, we do that by offering a number of things, some targeted programs that address a number of key rural issues that we know help position communities for economic development, but also engaging to help build capacity and provide that support. So those two pathways, if you will, are important. And I'll run through some of those programs right now to give you a good view of how we do that and how you might be able to connect with us as we move forward to build that environment for prosperity and support economic development. We have, as I said, a number of programs, and this is just an overview, and I give a bit more detail quickly as I move through. But our rural grants program that includes our building reuse and our economic infrastructure program, as well as a building demolition program, our community development block grant program that is, I always call it the bear of what we do, because the regulations on the federal side can be so heavy sometimes, but it offers wonderful opportunities to partner and really mirrors what we do on our rural grants, but building reuse loans, infrastructure demolition, shell buildings, the types of things that are important to economic development. when we look at the pipeline with EDPNC and David and his crew, all of our resources are marketed to those potential businesses and industries that can be a part of, to try and recruit those companies to our state and make sure that we have those resources that can support that. Our industrial fund utility account is a key resource that we have that supports rural infrastructure and industrial sites, and we'll talk about those a bit individually in a second. And then our Main Street and Rural Planning Program. Mark was a planner for us for years, did a great job. We miss him, but I'm sure he misses us as well, so we want to make sure that we continue to kind of move forward to help Main Streets and small towns develop their downtown districts and build the kind of environment that creates a sense of place and supports economic development. And then our Appalachian Regional Commission that isn't relevant here proper, but it's very important to what we do, focusing on our 29 westernmost counties in North Carolina to make sure that those economic development pieces are in place out there to support those communities as well. As an agency, we really do kind of focus on getting those programs out, expanding those programs in a way that supports the commerce mission, but also really stresses the priority areas for us. The first one is really building that strong ecosystem for rural prosperity. If we're not working it together, if we're not leveraging the resources of our partners, if we're not closely aligned with EDPNC and the community college systems and the UNC system schools to make sure that we're not missing opportunities, we're not building the strongest environment we can. We want to make sure that we do that. So that's one of our primary focuses. The second is really fostering job growth and investment. That is number one when you look at NC Commerce. That's what we do as an agency, but we really believe that we need to double down in our rural communities to make sure that we don't miss opportunities. As we said, there are more challenges, but there's also opportunities. How do we create the best environment that positions those communities through our programs and through our partnerships for jobs and investment that helps create prosperity? The third is really, I talked about this earlier, developing products and services that support increased capacity in our rural communities, our small towns that have very limited resources, very limited staff. We do that through our engagement with our planners and our Main Street partners and our program folks to put them really in close proximity to our communities so that we are resources. We can't do it from Raleigh. We can't do it with, you calling me or you calling David or calling Mark when he was here. If we're not out there and engaged to understand what those key issues are for our rural communities. And finally, just really prioritizing engagement and collaboration. This is a big part of what I think we need to do. I had the same mindset when I was at ECU. If we don't build the types of partnerships that last beyond the projects or the programs that we're working with you on, we're really losing and missing out on opportunities because the leadership at Commerce will change. I'll be somewhere different in 3 years. Mark might not be there, but you need to have those connections and the partnerships that are built in a way that they last well beyond those projects and those programs that we're working on. And just a bit more about each of our programs, so you'll see. And really, I advise anybody reach out and touch base with our program directors and me to make sure that we don't miss opportunities. As we said, there's a pipeline as it relates to bigger projects that EDPNC runs point to make sure that they can market and identify. But there are projects and opportunities that are below that level that we want to make sure that you understand we have resources that we can support. And as I said earlier, our rural infrastructure program is vital. In those connections, one of the biggest pieces is our rural infrastructure program that provides support for water, sewer, and your standard lifeblood, if you will, of economic development type support that really gives us a chance to connect. Melody Adams is our director there, and you can go to our website and really reach out and connect with her to make sure that if these are projects that can support, or resources that can support projects, that we don't miss those opportunities. Our rural building reuse program is probably our most used program, and Steve remembers approving many of these when he was sitting around the table. Hazel Edmonds directs this program for us and really does a great job, but it really focuses on repurposing vacant buildings and existing buildings if you need to expand those to support business and industry and job creation. And it's a wonderful program that really gives us a chance to invest in a lot of our rural communities. And again, reach out to Hazel if you have questions on that, and I'll certainly answer questions if you have those today. But it focuses on Tier 1 and Tier 2, and you can actually invest in rural census tracts in Tier 3 counties, but our high priority are Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties. the Rural Demolition Program, and really gives us a chance to address some issues that a lot of small towns face with, older, dilapidated buildings that are sitting there, an eyesore kind of being a drag on the economic development environment. It's used pretty frequently to demolish buildings, but we want to make sure that if you do use this program, it's for economic development purposes. You can't just tear down a building and put a convenience store there. We want it to be something that supports economic development in our Tier 1, Tier 2, and rural census tracts in Tier 3 counties. Community Development Block Grant Program, and we talked about this earlier. HUD can be a heavy bear, if you will, as it relates to regulations, but they really do have some good programs that give us an opportunity to invest. Our broader economic development programs includes things that really mirrors our building reuse, our rural grants program with building reuse, shell buildings, economic development support for downtown. And we actually have now a housing component to community development block grant. It's been very popular. As of last year, I think we invested about $18 million, 8 in January and another 10 in September, that allows us to support housing and housing-related activities in communities. And it's something that I think is really an expansion area for us to make sure that we begin to address more of those housing needs that support economic development and community development in our communities. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, Commerce had a thriving housing program through the Department of Community Assistance, the Division of Community Assistance. That was changed in 2013, and a lot of those resources were shifted over to infrastructure at the department and pushed over to the Department of Environmental Quality. I believe one of the areas that we really need to enhance or grow as it relates to commerce is our housing program. But our neighborhood revitalization is a new area to really tap into that and provide some resources. Our Main Street and Rural Planning Program, very popular, national model program that allows us to invest in downtowns and help communities bring back their downtown, and to invest in a way that creates that sense of place and supports economic development. Mark, very involved in the planning portion of our Main Street and Rural Planning Program that provides, those planners in our prosperity zones to give you support, capacity building, technical assistance, and training that really, I think is so important to building those bridges when we talk about creating an environment for rural prosperity and supporting communities so that they can take a step forward and be most competitive. But the Main Street program has been one that has some cost associated with it. So one of the things that we're trying to do as a result of the input that we've gotten from communities as we moved around the state is to build a comparable model that we can apply in rural counties that will support their development, provide the same types of technical assistance and capacity building that will position them for maybe Main Street program, or if not, to address some key issues there. Because we don't want to leave any communities out of the things that we think are so important to taking those capacity steps forward and building the best environment for economic development. And finally, our utility account, industrial fund utility account, is a targeted infrastructure program that really focuses on publicly funded projects, water, sewer, rail, natural gas, to really create an environment for growth and economic development. We place a very high priority in our utility account on industrial site and industrial site development, because we believe in the short term one of the biggest boosts that we can give our rural communities is creating inventory and capacity, so having those ready sites that allow communities to be ready for those investments and not miss out because they don't have the infrastructure in place, or don't have the sites the developers are looking for, the industry is looking for. We think this is a very important piece of that. I really love the industrial fund utility account because it's one of those programs that continually invest in itself. It's not an appropriated fund. You all are probably familiar, at least have heard of our JDIG program. An industrial fund utility account is a function of that and funded by our JDIG program. So every time we land a JDIG project, and you hear a lot about, there's a lot of discussion about these big projects going to Raleigh or Durham or Charlotte, and rural communities are missing out. But the utility account is special to me because every single time we land a JDIG project, there's an investment in the utility account that allows us to invest in our stronger grid of infrastructure for rural North Carolina. If a JDIG project is in a Tier 1 county, then companies, the incentive is they get back a percentage of their state withholding each year for a period of up to 12 years, based on their commitment to create jobs and investment and high-wage jobs, good-wage jobs. So if those communities or if those projects are located outside of a Tier 1 county, like in Charlotte or Raleigh or somewhere that's not Tier 1, a percentage of those investments that they would normally get back is diverted to our utility account. So if you were paying state withholding and your commitment was 50% over that 12-year period for a JD project, if it's located in a Tier 2 county, then that company would have to divert 10% of those withholdings they would normally get back to the utility account. If it's in a Tier 3 county, then 25% of those withholdings would go to our utility account, which builds a consistent fund for us to invest in our rural infrastructure, which I think is very important to us in our economic development support for our community. And finally, I just mentioned our ARC program, and it really is a targeted program that supports our westernmost counties and workforce and critical infrastructure, really supporting building and taking advantage of the natural assets and capacity that those counties have. So it's very important in what we do. It's not applicable in the East, but I think it's important enough for us to make sure that we include. And it's something that I think, kind of builds that strong grid and connection to us all across the state. So we're excited about those programs. We really offer them up and make sure that we don't want to miss opportunities to connect with you. And again, make sure that if there are projects that these programs can support, you reach out to us. And that's all I have. Thank you.